Is 22 Magnum and a handgun the same as 22 long rifle and the rifle for ballistics? I've heard that quite a bit, and this is going to be my second video in the series here. And today I'm going to test some CCI hollow points. So I have my 22 Magnum LCR revolver here with the 3-inch barrel. It's pretty much an average barrel length overall because it equates to about a 4-inch semi-automatic. I know some guys are carrying snub nose barrels, but I figure that's kind of a good in-between to test this from. So we're going to test our CCI hollow point 22 Magnum 40 grain. And to compare to that, in the rifle, I'm actually going to test CCI Velocitor. If you guys wonder if I'm going to test this in my Taurus pistol, yes I am. I got some more of that. I'm going to compare it to some other ammo, but today we're going to see how that does on a rifle. That is rated at 1435 feet per second through a rifle, and I'm going to use my Rossi RS-22 with an 18-inch barrel to test that. So 1435 is our rating. Our 22 mag is rated at 1875, but that's the rifle, so we're going to lose a lot of velocity in a handgun. So those might equal out to being very similar. However, I do think that this 22 long rifle is actually a lot hotter than a lot of 22 long rifle rounds out there. You know, your typical is somewhere around 1235, I believe. And this is rated at 1435 feet per second. So it's got a really hot rating. So we are going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get with these. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. I'm going to go into plain clear ballistics to see what the best potentials of those cartridges are. After that, I'm going to do more of our real world simulation where I have 4 layers of denim on this first 3-inch piece that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, we'll have a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard that's going to represent hitting ribs or sternum into the clear ballistics, and we'll see how they do with that rib simulation. And then, as always, I am going to shoot at my steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, so I have a couple readings there on the chronograph. That's from some Aguila Super Extra 40 grain. I was just running those to confirm my chronograph is working properly today because it is kind of dark out. So I'm going to see how these Velocitor 40 grains do. So I'm about 5 yards from that target. Let's see how our 40 grain Velocitors do. $12.98, $12.88, $12.89, $13.13, $13.21, $13.18, $13.03, $12.93, $12.88, $13.04. So I ran 10 rounds just because those first numbers kind of surprised me. I was expecting 1435 feet per second. So our 22 Magnum, I don't know its rating. I think it's 1875, but I don't know what it would be out of a handgun. So let's see how close we get to about that 1300 feet per second with 22 Magnum. 1167, 1236, 1256, 1273. So let me run a few more just so I can get this average a little bit better. So we were kind of all over the place here with these 22 mags, so I want to run at least, you know, a few more rounds so that I can get the average a little bit more consistent here. $12.96, $12.78, $12.67, $12.50, $11.96. See, that's the issue. I start getting into the 1100s and it just kind of skews the average a little bit. We're really close, but I would say average wise that 22 long rifle is just a hair higher in power. But you know, that is a plated bullet and our Magnum is a jacketed hollow point bullet, so it might perform differently between the two when we hit our, especially when we hit our rib simulation. So let's hit our ballistics gel block, see how these compare. All right, so let's do our plain clear ballistics shot. Just plain clear ballistics, no denim in the way to clog a hollow point, no rib simulation to slow down its penetration. So let's try our 22 Magnum here, see how this does in our plain clear ballistics. All right, Now let's see if our 22 long rifle with that hotter Velocitor ammo will be comparable. Go take a look. Alright, so there's definitely a big difference there. Our 22 Magnum went further, but it went further because it looks like it did not expand and then it tumbled. It looks like it went into about 6 inches and started tumbling around. With our Velocitor 22 long rifle, what we got here it is on top. We can clearly see that type of damage is generally from hollow point expansion. So we got some expansion going on, and then it didn't go as far, but we have a nice expanded hollow point. So with our 22 Magnum, what we're looking at here is about 18 inches of penetration. So we didn't over penetrate, and we did some okay tumbling damage. So in terms of self-defense, that's not too bad. And when we look at our 22 long rifle, you know, we have a little bit more damage here that's from cutting. Sometimes people kind of get mad at me. They're like, well, you can't tell damage in clear gel. I can tell some things going on here. And generally when I see this down here on the bottom with the 22 mag, that indicates tumbling. And when I see kind of a more consistent just flower out right about here, that indicates that's a bullet that expanded and is moving forward. But overall our damage looks less with the 22 long rifle, and I think part of that's just because it just continued to go in straight with an expanded hollow point rather than tumble around right here, because that tumbling length is actually wider than an expanded hollow point. And what we got with our 22 long rifles, we got about 13 3/4 inches of penetration. Once I start getting back here, I know that it looks like on camera that I'm putting my finger back further this way than where the bullet is, because the parallax is really bad when I have the bullets in the back of the block that way for whatever reason. But yeah, 13 3/4 is our penetration. So let's see how it does in more of our real world simulation. We'll put on our denim, put on our MDF, see how they compare that way. All right, 22 Magnum, it didn't do too well with no denim, so I'm not very hopeful of what it's going to do through denim and MDF. But let's hit this with our 22 mag. Let's see what we get. All right, let's do the same shot here with our 22 long rifle. See how this does. Let's go take a look. All right, we got the same thing going on with the denim and MDF, but the only real difference is it backed off that penetration a little bit. Very nice to see here. I mean, not with the 22 mag, we just poked a hole, and we knew that was coming because plain clear ballistics, it can't expand. It's going to do that. But that is a big hole there with our 22 long rifle. And we still energy dumped in those first 3 inches the way we did in plain gel, and yet we got good expansion going on through our medium density fiber board, and we can see an expanded hollow point. So what we got with our 22 Magnum is a penetration of about 16.5 inches, so we lost about 1.5 inches. With our 22 long rifle, we're a little bit shallow here. We're at about 11.5 inches. That being said, 22 long rifle is so easy to shoot, and if you made kind of a bad shot, you're probably going to make a whole bunch of other shots that are going to make up for it. That would be, I know that kind of talk doesn't necessarily fit into thermal ballistics testing and talk, but that's just what comes to my mind when I first think about this. So looking at this, they both did pretty good, because that tumbling damage again happened right there. It happened at about 5 inches and tumbled really good, did a lot of damage. So even though the end result is a quote-unquote fail, if we're looking for good penetration and expansion, I think it did just about as good as that 22 long rifle, but the 22 long rifle definitely looks cooler, and it definitely, you know, performed more the way it was designed to. You know, and that's kind of why they make 22 Magnum handgun rounds, is because they have to change those bullet designs a bit to make them work right. I don't think they do much to the powder, because I do see a lot of unburnt powder even with like gold dot and critical defense and stuff like that, but they do change the bullet compositions to make them perform a little bit better. So let's take a close-up look at these bullets. Then I'm going to shoot my steel, see what kind of practical accuracy I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at our bullets here. Here's our 22 mag. And, you know, I believe that when CCI makes these, they don't actually use a jacketed hollow point. I think they're doing more of the same thing because they're sister companies with Spear Gold Dot. So I think they're using a plating process, which they do call a jacketed hollow point, because it's much thicker than a plating, but in essence, it's a plating that's plated a bunch of times. But nonetheless, it's still a very hard copper plating. So when we went through our plain gel through our handgun, we didn't see any good performance at all. Our 22 long rifle through the rifle, that's fantastic. And I would not want to get hit with that at all. I know that's kind of a stupid statement to say. I hear it a lot, and people say it all the time, and it's kind of dumb. But just looking at that, you know, that's going to go in the body and start expanding out as big as at least 30 caliber, what I'm looking at here, if not bigger. Yeah, that's going to expand. It's going to dump its energy. It's going to cause a lot of damage. Surprisingly, though, when we go through our MDF here, and we have no change to our 22 Magnum, we still have about the same thing going on with our 22 long rifle as in plain gel. So even with the rib in the way, there's enough velocity there, enough bullet weight mass to cause that to still expand. So while that was a little bit under penetrating at under 12 inches, you know, you got to realize that that standard was set because of, you know, trying to make it through the arm shot from the side. Long story short, this is going to work with plenty of penetration on a front-on shot. So yeah, that performed quite well overall. Not much to say here, you know, no expansion, but we did get tumbling with the 22 mag, good expansion with the 22 long rifle. And this is what I was saying before. You know, tumbling wise, the length of that 22 mag is wider than that expanded 22 long rifle hollow point. That's why the damage tracks looked a little bit bigger. There's tumbling around, but while tumbling can be a good thing, it's not necessarily the most reliable of ways to get a larger hole going through something. That's where a hollow point is a pretty reliable way to do it. So that's a close-up look at those. All right, 12 yards from the target, I'm going to get a sight picture, pop off some rounds. You know, I am touting these as both as self-defense options, so, you know, home defense also. So let's see how our 22 Magnum does from 12 yards. All right, went for a headshot on that last one. Obviously missed it. So our point of impact is, you know, a little bit lower there with our 22 Magnum. Now our 22 long rifle and a rifle should be a bit easier for me to place shots on target. So see I can do it this. All right, so hard to see where I'm hitting, but it's always surprising just how quiet that feels and sounds. It's like I almost feel like I had a misfire or something because it's just so quiet and easy to shoot. But let's back it up and see how these continue to shoot at some distance. All right, 75 yards from the target, just for fun here. 22 Magnum. Let's see if I can make any hits with this. All right, so either I'm really off today or those are wildly inaccurate. I can't really see any consistency of where they are hitting. So I'll try to dial this in. Also, the double action pull on this gun is horrendous, so it could be that too. It goes single action. thing with this is I cannot hear if I'm hitting at all, but I did see an impact that was just strangely really low and to the left by, you know, probably 6-8 feet from where I'm aiming. And I know a lot of people will be on here that's, you know, kind of new to the channel will be like, well, duh. So that's not quite typical for me. I'm not trying to brag, but it's just not typical for me. So I'll keep trying here. They're kind of just hitting all over for me. Let me try a few more here. I'm thinking though consistently they are wanting to kind of go high from where I'm aiming, because one of those single action shots I aim center, it looks like I got a headshot with that. So I'm just going to aim at the very, very base of that silhouette. Don't know where they're all going, and you know, partly it's probably just me in the double action trigger, and also that point of impact with those sights has never been quite right for me. So obviously with the rifle, you know, we're gonna get better performance at a longer range shot. So let's see what this does for me. Dot on the Velocitor there. Alright, so those shoot pretty good for me. Let me back up to 100 yards with the rifle. See how they hit the steel at 100 yards. It does look like there's more headshots going on than what. Yeah, they're hitting kind of high for me. So maybe at 100 they'll even back out and drop back down to where I'm aiming at the center mass. So let's try that. Alright, so I'm 100 yards from that target. Not particularly hard shots to make with a little rifle like this. But let's see how they shoot for me. Alright, so they must be going high still. Let me aim below the target. Alright, so you know, from this distance it's kind of impossible for me to be able to see where those impacts are, but it does look like to me they would have to be shooting a little bit high from my point of aim, because you know, I missed several shots and those headshots at 75 yards that were not intentional, and the fact that I aimed at the very base of the target, if not a couple inches below it, and I still hit, I would say that that would indicate that, you know, they're just shifting up a little bit from my point of aim on this rifle. And by the way, I have not messed with these sights at all. I haven't touched one thing since I pulled it out of the box. And the reason why is because when I took my first shots a week ago, I put like 3, 4, 5 in the same hole, same right elevation, right windage, and yeah, it was only from 5 yards, but still I'm like, that seems right. So let's see if I can get more hits here from 100 yards. All right, so overall pretty accurate, you know, and that really is the point of this. You know, a lot of people, when they have rifles like this, they're kind of showing what it can do at 50 yards with their scope on it. And now look at this, they'll be like, oh man, you had a 12-inch group. And yeah, but my point is to, you know, go free-handed, see how it kind of does for a kind of self-defense scenario, because I'm not going to be using a rifle in any type of self-defense scenario. It's going to be a lot closer than this too, but it is kind of cool to see, you know, what the limitations are of whatever firearm it is. Like I'll come back from with, you know, a 45 ACP from 100 yards. There's no practical use for that, but it's just what I do. I like to stretch out the limitations, see what the limitations are. So I would say overall this is a pretty average rifle for its abilities to, you know, take the iron sights, which are actually fiber optic, and just, you know, hit targets pretty easy at some distance. So looking at this, you know, does the 22 long rifle in a rifle, is it the same as a 22 mag in a handgun? And when we looked at our first test where it was like full metal jacket or round nose plated, I would say absolutely yes. But when we're talking about, you know, pushing the limits of those rounds a little bit, 22 mag, you can't push it a whole lot hotter than what it is here out of a handgun. Now, if you got a longer barrel, it might get better performance, but you know, my 3-inch barrel is a pretty average barrel length because it equates to about a 4-inch semi-auto. And I actually looked up some of the velocity ratings from the Walther WMP, which I think is something like a 4.3-inch barrel, something like that. And with the heavier loads like critical defense and 50 grain stuff, it had the same velocity as the 3-inch LCR X. So that really confirms that the velocities are pretty similar. Now, when I was looking at some of the information with like some of the 30 grain stuff, at that point it looks like cylinder gap came into play, and it wasn't getting as much velocity as a semi-auto. But with the actual self-defense rounds, it was the same in this LCR revolver. But back to my point here, are they the same? And I'm going to say no. And it's because the bullet construction is really the only reason why we saw a difference in our terminal ballistics. The velocities were similar enough that, you know, if both of these had the same bullet on the end of that cartridge, you know, if the 22 mag had that just that copper plated bullet somehow on there and designed it a way to shoot from a 22 mag cartridge, it would do the same in that gel as this 22 long rifle did in there. But because the bullet construction is tougher and it's made for getting higher velocities out of a rifle, they can't make it that way because it would just fragment every time. And then on the flip side of that, if you take that cartridge and you put it in a handgun, it's going to be too hard to expand and all of that. That's why, you know, currently, just over the past few years, I would say the past decade only, we've had 22 Magnum specific to handguns for defensive loads. But this whole thing, 22 long rifle, is the same as 22 mag in a handgun and 22 long rifle in a rifle. If we look at it, that's been a statement that's been around for a lot longer than defensive 22 Magnum handgun loads have been around. So I would say, all in all, that statement is actually false, that it's not the same. But I think really what it comes down to is people were looking at velocity numbers and not, you know, terminal ballistics and bullet design. They're just looking at velocity. Wow, you get, you know, with the hot 22, I get 1,300 feet per second, and a regular 22 mag and a handgun, I get 1,300 feet per second. It's the same. But there's a lot more that comes into play when you're talking about bullet design and construction. So when we take the whole thing together, is it the same? It's a big no, it's not. That's not to say that the 22 mag isn't a good choice through a handgun. It's just, it's not the same. So this is a test today where we put, you know, a 22 mag CCI Maxi-Mag versus one of the supposedly hotter 22 long rifles through a rifle, which got nowhere near rate of velocity. And even then, I would say the 22 long rifle, if I had to pick one of these for self-defense, even though we got a little bit subpar penetration with one of those shots, I'm picking this. I like the idea of a bullet expanding out. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.